I'm going to give you directions on how to do the color wheel sheet. You have in front of you at your table a bunch of paints. You'll notice that you have the primaries, but you also have a magenta. That will help you make the purple a little bit easier. If you make purple with these two, it doesn't necessarily always turn out right. So you've got your paint palette, and the first thing that I want you to do is you are going to paint the hue section first. So on this worksheet, that's going to be the second row up, and we're going to put the primaries in place. You're going to pick the smaller paintbrush because you're going to be painting into these smaller areas. Make sure you've got some water and some paper towel. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're just going to kind of set up your palette, and you only need a tiny bit. You could always add more. Like, look how small of an amount of paint I added to the palette. Especially for something small like this, just for color mixing practice. All right, so that's going to be your primaries, and those are the ones that you use to mix all the other colors besides the magenta when we get to the purple. I'm going to have you put down paper towel a little bit longer than what your work surface is for easy cleanup. You just have to pick it up and throw it away. You can also use the paper towel to dry your paintbrush here and there to get the extra water off. So the first thing I'm going to do is just dip my brush in a little bit of water to loosen up the paint. It is already fluid, but I like to be able to brush it nice and easy. Notice the tip of my brush. It does not have a ton of paint on it. I don't have a big glob hanging off. So I'm going to just go with my red section first, second one up. If you end up making a mistake, the cool thing about acrylic paint is that you can paint over it. Notice I am just pushing the tip of my brush onto the paper. I like to paint in the same direction. It looks nice and neat. I will be looking at how neat and how controlled your paint is. So your goal is to stay inside the lines. Try not to make any ghost areas, which are spots of white. You want it completely covered up. So now I've got my red cell done. I'm going to rinse it really well in my cup, and so that it's not too wet, I might drop a little water there, and then I'm going to loosen up my blue. Sometimes we have to turn our work so we're not dragging our hand in it, so it's okay to rotate. Make sure you're going in the hue section and paint the hue cell. If you have too much water on your brush, it might drip and run, but you can always dry it and go back and paint it. Going to dry that or rinse that. And then I'm going to switch it. Since I'm a right-handed person, I keep pivoting so that my right hand is closest to where I'm painting, and I'm going to paint in that. So primary colors, we went over this, is what makes all the other colors. And we talked about tints, tones, and shades, so we are going to work on tints, tones, and shades. To practice at first, we're going to work within this box. So I think I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to make that purple we were talking about. So if I make purple using the red and blue, I always start with the lightest color first, and I can take some over here, and I want to show you why we don't use the cadmium red to make our purple. We have more success using the magenta. Just by taking a little bit of this, you can see that is not a beautiful purple. Right now it's like a blah brown. Now the blue has overpowered the cadmium red, and we have more, it looks more like a black, which later on, if we want to use it for our shade, we probably could just use it right from the palette because we just built a really blah looking purple. Let's see the difference with magenta. I'm going to loosen up that magenta. And now I'm going to add a small amount. You want to go slow with something like this to go into the magenta, and look at that. It's starting to develop. You can, if you're using large amounts of paint, use your paint knife. It helps not to like ruin your brushes. I mean, I'm working really small, so we don't necessarily need to use the palette knife quite yet. But you're more than welcome to try, especially if you have large amounts of paint on your paint palette. So look at how nice, and the comparison of the two purples. You can see them developing a little bit easier. So let's use this purple or violet onto the sample. So I'm going to go with my hue. I might even want it a little bit darker. It's kind of closer to a red violet. Let's go a little bit deeper so it's not so pink. Go back over this. All right. Now, when we talk about tints, that is a little bit of color added to white. So notice that I said the color is added to the white. I'm going to put out my white, make sure my brush is nice and clean, and then grab some of this color and add it to here. So now I made a lighter version of that section, and I'm going to go to my tints. All of the definitions are right here for you in case you forget what's what. And I'm going to place that in there. I always start with an outline. I'm using the tip of my brush, trying to do it as nice and neat as possible. In between, I'm going to rinse. Now, it goes to tone and it goes to shade. Remember how we talked about possibly using this muddier purple because it looks almost black as our shade maker? We are going to now use this purple and we're going to add this color to make gray, like a grayish tone of that color. I might make it a little bit brighter. You could use it straight from the palette at that point because you can see that it's kind of like a grayer tone of the color, and then I'm going to paint that one in place. And now the last cell is called shade. And since I have my violets all set here, I'm going to take now at my last time and add a little bit of what looks like black into that violet that I made over here and make it nice and dark. You can do all sorts of variations of these tints, tones, and shades. And then I'm going to turn my paper so that it's a little bit easier. And I'm going to outline nice and gentle, barely even touching the paper. It's nice and loose with the water, and I'm going to drag it over here. My ultimate goal for you is to do this nice and neat, evenly, cell by cell. If you start with these three, you can keep using your palette for the rest of the colors as you work through. Eventually, the whole thing will be nice and clean. Try your best to keep these areas clean as well. We're practicing painting craftsmanship, so see what you can do not to make a big mess, okay? If you do make a mistake, remember you always have white, the paper is white, and you can go right over it.